I had a request here this week for some food illustration, so I figured I would just demonstrate it on my iPad here. The person wanted to see it in Procreate, and so let's get after it. I'm going to show you how I approach an illustration. Okay, so today we're going to do a hot dog. And I'm just using this copy blue color. If I want to change the color, I can do it up here. Usually I'm in the disc mode, and that is how I illustrate. And this is really just going to be a rough sketch, and then we can kind of perfect it as we go. So we're going to do a top view down, looking down on this hot dog. And one thing that I find really useful in Procreate is when you drag and hold a line, it creates a straight line for you. The same goes for shapes. So know that as you're moving forward, if you're just beginning with your journey in Procreate. So I think I like this look a little bit better, so I'm going to curve this line as well. You can edit your shape to how you want it to be, and that's going to work for me. And then I will do the same kind of with the ends here. I will create a half circle, hold, and then you can see you can adjust it from there. Pretty straightforward. Okay. So this looks like a pretty good dog. Oops. Okay. Now it might kind of look like a hot mess right now, but we're going to definitely clean this up. And paint it. Okay. So we kind of have this zigzag shape for mustard and ketchup. So you can see I just made a new layer here. One thing that I can do is create this, use this guide that I drew on layer 1. We're going to duplicate this and use it again. And you might hear Lucy in here with me, my little kitty. She's vocal. It's probably feeding time. Huh? Okay. So what I can do here is, you see on layer 2, this is one of my sauces here. And I'm going to duplicate this by sliding to the left and hitting duplicate. Another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change this color slightly so I will be able to see the difference between the two. So I'm going to go up into my magic wand tool here, go to hue, saturation, and brightness, hit the layer. I'm just going to make it a little bit darker here and bring the brightness down. And then what I can do is I can slide this over a little bit. I could even kind of move it around here. There we go. So I don't know if you saw that, but I took the arrow key up here on the top left area. You'll see that blue arrow, and I can just maneuver this piece around. We kind of want to offset the other sauce, and then what I can do is go in here and just use my eraser and erase out areas that would be covered. And kind of use this as my guide here. So I'm gonna make both of those go away for a minute, and I'm gonna erase out, oops, let me go to my layer 1 and erase out this guide, just so it doesn't get confusing when I kind of go to redo this. So you can do one of two things. You can erase out some of the lines that are lines that you don't want to keep, or you can just go ahead and go over this and redraw it and just use this. So this is one way that you can do it. I'm gonna turn back on these layers. I'm actually going to go back on layer 1 and kind of erase out some of these hot dog layers where the sauce is going to cover it a little bit. And I'll probably be adjusting that. So what I can do here in my layer is combine all of this by pinching those 3 layers together. You can change the opacity here when you go to draw over the top of it. I'm going to create a new layer. And there are lots of ways to approach drawing on the iPad. So this isn't the only way. This is just one way that I actually use the iPad. Most of the time I treat it like it's a painting. So my approach is not really traditional in the sense of how artists are using Procreate today. Usually they have a layer for shadows and they have a layer for light, and I don't always work that way. And that is generally, I think, why a lot of my artwork really looks painterly. But as you're working, you can find your own way to work that kind of suits you. So you can see here I'm just kind of using colors that are colors that these items would be. That's not going to work. What am I going to do here? Just cleaning this up a little bit. Creating my straight edges. And if you want, you can even create another layer. Sometimes I, create separate layers and then I will combine them. So with this part, I'm on a separate layer and I'm doing the mustard here on top. And I'm trying to give it a little bit more of an organic shape. Kind of like mustard would have. And then we'll shade it as we go along. You'll notice a lot of times I will kind of move my board around here. I'll try not to make you dizzy with it. So there is my hot mustard. I'm going to go in and create ketchup. Medium loose. It doesn't have to be perfect. Of course, because we're in a separate layer, we can kind of do what we want here and erase out the parts that we don't want to keep. Whoops. Well, we'll just kind of roll with this. Okay, so our mustard is going to be on top here. So I'm going to erase out any parts that might be covered again by the mustard. It's kind of more helpful to see here. Alright, so it looks kind of shoddy, but you get the idea here. I'm actually going to keep these on separate layers for now, just because I'm going to paint underneath these and use them to paint within. So you can get rid of your drawing layer if you want, and then you can do a number of things. You can combine these layers to create one and then start painting, or I often will have multiple layers happening at the same time. But we're gonna start here with painting the local color, and I'm just gonna put this here, a local color. So that's the base color. It's one color per item. It's the color that item might be. I have a ton of brushes, but some of my favorite brushes are made by Frankentune. I love their First Nomad brushes. I use the clean roller all the time to draw with. I use it kind of like a pencil, and then I fill parts in. I just like the squareness of it. Another brush pack that I use really frequently. Let's see if we can find it here. Here we go. So the Essential Max pack. This is a soft pastel. Again, this is kind of a square brush, and I often am using it as well. So those are some of my favorite brushes to use. So I'm going to use that today. I'm going to use their clean shader for now. Again, I'm underneath here, And you can work several different ways. You can just kind of paint it in here. You can draw lines and then do a fill. Let's see if we can get a nice solid line here. You can just drag your fill in there, and if you need to adjust your threshold, you just keep your pen on the page and move it back and forth. I'm gonna have to go in and kind of fix this anyway, so we'll just do that. And I think for this illustration, I'm actually going to do separate layers for each of these items. So we've got our hot dog, that's the local color for our hot dog. We've got our bun, which is generally kind of a golden color. I like this color. So you can make your brusher bigger if you want. Fill that in. And you know, I was really excited to see the suggestion in the comments of one of my videos. So if you guys have something you'd like to see, let me know. I am open. Okay, so we have that. Let's move to our mustard. I'm gonna actually do the same thing, do a layer below, and I need to find a nice mustardy color. And I'm just gonna fill in this space here. Again, local color, one color. This is the base color. You can always clean up edges with your eraser. We're going to give this some dimension. I've been wanting to illustrate a hot dog for some reason for a while. And I looked today to see if I had any imagery from some photo shoots that I had done in the past. And I couldn't find any images that I wanted to use, so you know what? I've been wanting to do a hot dog for a while. Let's do it. Okay, so I'm going to drag this layer down below, and I'm going to fill it with a red color. I kind of like this bright pink color. It's not exactly a ketchup color, but sometimes it's kind of fun to use slightly different colors. Food illustration is really fun too, because you can become as detailed or not as you want. Food is kind of always fun to draw. Okay, so we have our base colors down. I'm going to combine my mustard together and its outline, and I'm going to combine my ketchup together. I have more work to do on my bun here. So we have a shadow, kind of a darker part that's within the bun. So I'm going to find the local color, kind of a brown color, and kind of get that in here. And then we kind of have this lighter yellow. Let's see. So we've got our local color down. Now we can start shading or adding light and darks. Now I'm using a painterly approach for this. So we'll just kind of work like we're painting in oil, as opposed to maybe doing a bunch of layers. And so So here I'm going to add this light area. And you can even kind of go into the brown area. You can even go a little bit lighter. Whoops. So this is kind of how I approach most of my work on the iPad. It's really kind of a painterly approach. Okay, so one thing that I really love about Procreate is that you can use an alpha layer, and I use alpha lock here. And what's great about alpha lock, I'm going to remove that, is that you only paint within the area that you've painted before. So anything, if you're painting outside of it, you can't paint outside of it. So you could create a clipping mask, but sometimes I just like to use this technique. So I can kind of paint along the edge here. And you can see there are places where I could clean up my edge there. But then I can also kind of come in. Actually, we'll do something different there. You can also use your smudge tool. Sometimes I smudge stuff a little bit. I try not to get too carried away with it. We want to have nice hard edges and some nice blending as well. I still want it to have the feeling of being painterly. So one technique that I really do enjoy is creating shadows, and I use this technique a lot. So I usually go into a dark blue, and I kind of live by the notion warm light, cool shadows, cool light, warm shadows. So this kind of dark navy royal blue is a great shadow color. I am on a separate layer, and I'm going to create a shadow underneath this hot dog. I'm just kind of straightening it out there. And kind of go around the hot dog. So you can see here what that layer looks like. Then what I do is I go into my Gaussian blur, and I'm going to blur that out a little bit. And I just kind of move back and forth here until I find what I like. I go in and then I put this to multiply, and you can see that really creates the shadow. Most of the time I don't leave it at 100%. I kind of move this around and play with that and see what I want it to be at. So for now we can kind of keep that on its own layer, and as I keep working this hot dog, I'll probably be adjusting that. Eventually I will bring that shadow into the bun and merge it down, but for now I'm just going to leave it. So I'm going out of alpha lock so I can clean up some of my edges here. Whoops, sometimes I have to zoom in here and kind of clean up this edge a little. Oops. It's not going to cooperate here. And another great tool that I use a lot to clean up edges is the selection tool. And I'll select an area that I want to clean up. And then I'll bring in my eraser tool and just clean up that edge to give it a hard edge. So oftentimes you can do that as you're moving along. You can see we've got lots of softness here. So as you can see, I'm just kind of cleaning up. Whoops. Okay, well, it's starting to look good. The bun is starting to look good. I'm actually going to bring this back into alpha lock. I'm moved back and forth all the time to kind of even out this shading here. You can use your smudge tool. Sometimes I'm using the soft airbrush here, but sometimes I will use a textured brush if I want to create a little texture. For this, I'm just going to smooth it out with this brush. And I'm going to bring it back out of alpha lock. Clean up some of this other stuff. And one way you can really see what's going on with your image is by changing your background color. A lot of times it's advisable, especially when you're doing portraits, to use a gray background, a middle gray background, so you really have a good idea of how your values are set up. So we'll just leave this in the background. And I can see where in my bun here I have stuff showing through, this gray background showing through. So sometimes what I do is I will take a white, depending on the color of my item, and I'll just paint in these areas here that I can see that some of the background is showing through. We just want it to be good and solid back there. And you can make your brush wider if you need to do that. There were just some areas here that I saw. And then if I need to clean up any edges, like this white edge is showing through, I can clean that up. And then I just merge them together. All right, so our bun's looking pretty good. Now I think we're gonna move on to our hot dog. And you can see I've taken away this outline here. Sometimes you can merge it into your image, but for this one I think I don't need it. I just kind of needed it as a guide, maybe. And so for the hot dog, I'm gonna add some light and some dark areas to give this dimension and really make it feel like it's rounded. And how I'm going to do that is we have this guy on its own layer. I'm going to create an alpha lock here. And I'm going to sample this color that I have. So if I make my layers go away? Go away. I'm going to sample this color by putting my finger down and holding it. And there I've sampled the color. I can go in here and just go a little bit lighter. And then create this light area in the center. And then what I'll do is I will go back into my colors here, and you can see here in my history I have the original color of the hot dog, so I can select that, and then I can bring it down to get a little bit darker color. And because we have this in alpha lock, I can just run that color along the sides here. All right. Okay, maybe this. Okay. So then what you can do is you can take your brush, your soft brush, and you can soften this so it grades out. You can also take your Gaussian blur and blur it out like that as well, depending on how smooth you want it to be. You can use a combination of both. So that's probably going to work for me, and then I might just kind of continue to paint on this guy. So I'm going to take him out of alpha lock and use my pencil here, and I can kind of clean up some of these edges and kind of just do the painterly thing here, kind of switching in between my colors and softening that. If you're losing your color here, you can always do what I just did and paint underneath it to create that more solid color. And if you need to clean up an edge, you can again use our selection tool, select out this area that you want to erase to create a clean edge. I highly recommend, drawing food, especially if you're kind of stuck and you want to practice technique, but you're not really sure what to draw. Sometimes it'll kind of get you out of a slump if you're having, artist block. So this is starting to look like a hot dog. Now I think what I can do is I can go in and even add some more darks to this. So I'm going to flip it into alpha lock mode again. And just kind of add a little bit more kind of dark in there. And then really use a very small blur tool here. Just to smudge that out. This helps it look like it's recessed in there. And if you really wanted to, you can even add probably some highlights to this hot dog. So we could actually, I'm going to show you a different tip. So you can leave it like this, actually, or what I like to do sometimes is create a separate layer take an even lighter color, put it on top there, and go into my Gaussian blur and blur it out a little bit. You can, and of course you can do a number of things here on layers, like screen, or add really as like super neon. So you could do that and adjust the opacity. Let's see what it looks like, normal or screen. I kind of like screen. So I'm going to combine these 3 layers together, and there is our hot dog. Now it's starting to really look like a hot dog and have dimension, and that is really exciting, right? So let's move on to our sauces. And first we're going to start, we're going to start with our ketchup. I think I'm going to clean up some of these edges just a little bit because they feel a little too straight. So we'll kind of go in. And then I'm going to go in with my eraser and clean up these edges. Okay. And we'll do that for the top part as well. Okay, and I'm going to erase out the edges. It's a real nice organic feel. So much like what we did with our hot dog, we're going to do with the sauce, because what makes something look realistic is the lighting that we have. So any areas that need to be filled in, I'm just going to clean up any areas or fill in any areas. Again, you could do a layer underneath if you wanted. We'll just clean those up. Get down loose. Okay. So we're going to put this in, let's see, alpha lock mode. And I'm going to start adding some dark colors. So this is going to be our shading. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger. You can even just kind of paint it in there again. What's great about using the alpha lock is you can kind of just add color and keep your shape here. Okay. And then what I'll do is I'll go in and add a highlight color. And you see these especially kind of around the corners. And you can really see how this starts making this come alive. Okay. And you can leave it like this. You can go in and blur it a little to get those areas blending nicely. You could do a combination of this and the smudge tool, which I kind of like the option of doing that. And sometimes it's good to bring it out of Alpha Lock on such a small piece if you need to kind of get in and smudge stuff around, especially towards the edge. Okay. But one thing we can't forget is when we have light, we often have shadows underneath these items. And so we're going to create a shadow for this ketchup here. And I'm just going to duplicate this layer. And I'm going to put Alpha Lock on it. I'm going to take my navy blue color, and because we're on Alpha Lock, I can just fill this in. I'm going to bring it down below our ketchup layer. And what's nice, let's see, we can take it out of Alpha Lock. We'll have to do that to blur it a little bit. So that's good. It's a little too dark, so we can adjust this just a little bit. Make sure it's in multiply mode. And you can kind of play with how dark you want it to be. I'm just going to leave it like this for now. I'm not necessarily sure that I'm super happy with that just yet, but for now we'll leave it like that. Now I think I want to even add some brighter highlights to this liquid, because we will have some really sharp highlights. So I'm just going to add this nice highlights here and there. Just add this light right next to this dark, and you can continue to adjust these things as you go along. You can even adjust your edges if you feel like you need to. As you can see, that kind of helps to add a little bit of this dark red color in. Excuse me. So you can kind of do this just like you would your highlight. So any weird edge you can clean up. And even with your liquefy tool, let's see, we're going to need to, I guess we aren't in alpha mode. So with your liquefy tool, you can create momentum. If you need to make something follow a curve, you can use it as well for that. So don't forget, you have those tools at your disposal. Liquefy is an amazing tool that I love. All right, so I think for my ketchup, I am good to go. Now you could do one of two things here. I think we can bring this out a little bit. You could duplicate this layer and change the color of it. So you can adjust your color here and switch it over to yellow. Let's see, I just ran across that. If you didn't want to paint a mustard layer, you could do that. Kind of move it around. So you could do that, but actually I'm going to go ahead and paint this, and we're going to go through the same process we did on the mustard that we did on the ketchup. So I'm going to kind of shape this with my select tool. Okay. And then I'll do the top part. Whoops, sometimes you have to make sure that this does what it's supposed to and it selects what you're supposed to get here. Okay. So that is good. Then what we can do is we can add in our darks and our lights. I'm going to put this in alpha lock mode for a moment. Again, I'm going to sample my color here. And I'm going to get my darker color. And I'm just going to paint it in along the edges. You can hear Lucy in the background. It's feeding time in about an hour, so this starts about an hour before. She is definitely a foodie. Okay, you can see where I painted in that area. All I have to do is sample, paint back in this color. I'm not being a perfectionist about this. All right. Now we can go get our light color in there. Of course, because this one is on top, we might have some more light areas. And it doesn't hurt to look at reference for these things so you know how the light works with your mustards and things like that. It's kind of helpful. Okay. So then you can go in to your Gaussian blur. I don't want to do too much of that. You can see how easily it can just be a little too soft. We want it to be a little more painterly. So I'm going to use a little bit of the blur, and then I'm going to use my smudge tool and kind of straighten up some edges, smooth up some areas. Okay. And I can see I have some edges to clean up here. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go back to my dark color. I'm going to bring this out of Alpha Lock and just kind of clean up some areas. I can even make this a little bit darker. I'm going to cut some of these areas out, I think, too, or erase them out. Oops. No, we want to draw, not erase. And the undo tool is your friend, always. And I'm kind of always zooming in and out to kind of assess what this looks like. And I highly recommend, you know, when we're working so closely with something, it can look kind of funky if you don't zoom in and out and stand back, so to speak, from your piece. So make sure to do that. What's nice about the select tool is you can see exactly where you're erasing. Okay, so if we want to, we can even add some brighter highlights here, which we're going to want to. All right, and of course, we're going to want to also have a shadow for this as well. So we're going to bring this, duplicate this. I'm going to make this an alpha lock. I'm going to go back into my blue color. Bring this below. Set this to multiply. And then of course give it a little bit of a Gaussian blur. Maybe that's gonna work. Why isn't it working? Oh, because we're in alpha lock, so you have to make sure you're not in alpha lock when you Gaussian blur it. And then we're gonna bring that down, opacity down a little bit. And you can kind of move it around to where you think it is correct. At this point, we may even want to combine these two, so I'm actually going to combine this. Merge down. Whoops, no. Combine down. So because this layer is a multiply layer, if we merge down, it will make that a multiply layer, and we don't want to do that. So you can combine down. For now, we're going to just merge down, and then what we can do, I think, whoops, cancel. We're going to liquefy this, kind of move. And kind of maneuver things around, and it will maneuver your shadow around. As well. So just help make this look a little more natural. Of course, Lucy is up here now, so you might hear her moving around. So one thing that I see that I might want to enhance is my hot dog color. It feels very bland to me, which it really looks like a hot dog, but maybe I want to make it a little more, get down, Moose, pink, So I might go in to a hot pink color. You can of course adjust this by the magic wand tool if you want to go in and adjust the color, but sometimes I just like to do it this other way. And what I'll do is I'll click on the hot dog layer, hit select, and it will select the hot dog, and then I will use that selection and paint in this hot pink area in a new layer. So then I can select on this with our options here kind of what I want to do with the color here. And you can just select color and pick the opacity until you've hit a color that you like, or an overlay. This might make it a little more enticing. It's not a drab gray color. Alright, so I can deselect that layer. And doesn't that look like a little more enticing here with a little bit more pink in there as opposed to just the flat hot dog there? You be the judge, but I think I'm going to stick with that. So here's the time that you can assess things like your layers, your shadows. And one last thing that I thought I might do is add a little bit of texture to the inside of the bun. So similar to what I just did, I'm going to select this layer. By clicking select, I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to go into my brushes and I'm going to find one that's got a nice texture. And scroll through like a charcoal might be good. Have some rule brushes here. Let's see. What's great now is that you can actually use Photoshop brushes too, which I think is great. Let's see what those dense speckles look like. So I'm gonna pick a color that would be a good inner bun color and just see what I can make for texture. Then I can also erase out any parts that I don't want to be included here. I'm really digging this texture. This is a brush pack that I have purchased somewhere on the interwebs. Okay, so you could leave it like that, or you can go into your options here and try different options. Now some of these are pretty funky. So probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to multiply, and then I'm going to lower the opacity there. Alright, and I can deselect that. So you can we can zoom in here and see, to make this a little more authentic, you could go in and create an eraser out of the brush that you utilized See, that's, I don't know if that's the brush that I utilized here. Oops. Let's see what other texture. Oh, we used this. This is what we used. Okay. So I can use that same brush that I used and then go in and erase along the edge. So we don't have such a hard edge here. It feels a little bit more organic here. And then you can kind of pick how much you want there. You can even actually blur it a little bit. All right, and that concludes your tutorial on your hot dog. But one last thing that you can do if you want to make this look even, you want to make it look like it's not floating, is we can again create a shadow. I always recommend shadows. They help to make things look real. So we're going to alpha lock this. We're going to use our handy dandy blue color. Actually, we need to change our brush back to something a little more solid. Okay. We're going to take this off alpha lock. We're going to Gaussian blur this. And then we are going to put it on multiply. And then you can kind of play with how much you want that to show up. You can also take this and manipulate it and make it a little bit larger too. So play with it. And there you have a hot dog. Now at this point of the game, you can delete any layers that you aren't using. You can delete your sketch layer unless you want to keep that. And you can smush all these layers together. We'll have this one as our bottom layer because I'm afraid that if we, let's look at this really quick. Oops, no. So you can see because that bottom layer was a multiply layer, it turned everything onto multiply. So we'll combine everything but the very bottom layer. And there you have this amazing little hot dog. So you have to let me know if you liked this tutorial and you want some more tutorials like this that are Procreate tutorials. Of course, you can get even more painterly with these, but this is kind of it shows you my workflow when I am creating artwork. So let me know what you thought, and until next time, keep painting and keep creating, and I will see you later.